G'day, g'day, wherever you are in the world of the interwebs. This is Mastering Music, Mastering Life. Tony Jack, the Bear Man's here for first podcast of 2019. Happy New Year. And it's great to be back on deck. And I think as I mentioned in my last podcast, which was me just riffing, I said that one of my intentions of the podcast was to look at diversifying the range of guests. And yes, we have a lot of music people on, and my next guest is a lady that works in music, but she also has diversified into the world of dancing and performing, in particular pole dancing. And she also works in the music scene. You can see in the background there, for those of you who are watching us on YouTube, she owns and operates Melbourne Backline Hire, and she'll let us know what Backline Hire is all about and what she does there. But this lady, her name is Kitty Jane. She is she's a professional pole dancer. She just entered the world of professional pole dancing. She's in the metal scene. She plays music. She is a very intelligent young lady and a person who's got a tremendous work ethic. And anyway, let's introduce you, and we'll let you know why you're on. So, Kitty, welcome to Mastering Music, Mastering Life. Happy New Year. Great to have you on.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you too.
How did it all start off for you?
For me, I've been a musician for a very long time.
No, sorry. How did the year? How did 2009? Did you greet 2019?
Well, with high hopes, big dreams, lots of goal setting. So, coming out of 2018, which was a monster year for me, I needed to somehow set that bar a little bit higher. So I am treading onto new territory once again, and I'm 2 parts petrified and 1 part excited.
Good.
So I'm getting back into training after having way too much food over the Christmas period and realising how much work I've got ahead of me.
Yeah, I think that anyone can be forgiven for a little overindulgence over the festive season, but I think you're doing okay. I wouldn't be too worried about where you're at. Although you obviously you're setting your own standard and know where you need to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I wasn't going to come and fat shame you on the podcast or anything like that today.
Yeah, don't do that.
No, I would never. I would never do that. That's actually.
I was critic sometimes, anyways. But
I think a lot of us, and women in particular, they do a good enough job on their own, just fat shaming themselves. I don't need anyone else's help.
There's certainly a lot of pressure there, but I've been somewhat desensitized to having my body out there, just because when you do pole dance, you can't really wear a lot of clothing. It's not really conducive to good grip on the pole. So if you're doing acrobatic stuff, it's usually better to keep it minimal.
Yeah, I not that I know, but I'll take your word for it. So the reason you're on is I last year was seeing your little videos up on Instagram, and you were doing your routines, and first thing I noticed is that just pretty much every day or other day when you would always be working, training. And I've just always admired anyone who's got a good work ethic, who is consistent, and who just, puts in 100% of their effort into whatever it is they're doing. And I also wanted to, like I said, diversify some of the guests on the podcast. And I thought it'd be a great idea to kick off the year with some girl power. And, and so, I know you've been in bands, you got your back hire company, and you're doing your pole dancing. So just tell us, how did you sort of get into this whole mess, if you will?
Yeah. So in the music side of things, because I had been a musician for many years, I did acquire a fair bit of musical equipment over those years. And what eventually happened is I partnered up with someone and launched a business on that premise that rents musical equipment to stream artists and musicians, and even for festivals and East Coast touring. So it's something that started off really, really super small, and started operating from out of the house rather than having a warehouse facility. So that's been a massive labour of love over the last few years. And to be honest, it's something that I've only been able to switch to doing pretty much full time in this last few months. So prior to that, I've always had to have stable income coming through just to make sure that this new business didn't end up spiraling into financial ruin. But what motivated us and really kicked it off is that desire to create something in the marketplace that musicians needed, and to be more flexible and be more personable. So that's one of the reasons why Melbourne Backline Hire operates 24/7 around the clock, which means, yes, I do keep ungodly hours and I don't often get to go out on holidays. But up until this point, it has been pretty labour intensive. So I'm now looking at ways to streamline those processes so I can take a bit of a step back out of certain roles and really focus on what I'm best at. But I've got to say that Melbourne Backline Hire has been an amazingly formative experience for me. I've learned so much, and it has dove me, head first into the backstage side of things, where I myself learned how to do a lot just by being present, just being there, and just working side by side and shadowing some really great people along the way.
So when this thing first started out, it was just a matter of you. See, it's really great to see a lady that is working in music that is not in. Again, I'm not one to talk about gender roles and that, but it's great to see that there are more and more women who are working in roles and taking on, building businesses that have usually been reserved for boys for many years. And so, whether it's female roadies, female techs, female audio engineers, front of house mixers, working with the gear as opposed to behind the scenes or admin and all that kind of stuff that people may usually associate women being involved with. So it's great to see someone like yourself who's in there on the front line doing the backline thing, pun intended. So did you find, how did you find initially when you started out? Was it difficult for you being female, or did you take that on as a challenge, or?
Yeah, I've got to be honest. Like especially in the earlier days, I was met with a bit of hesitation or treated as a little bit as an anomaly or an outsider. So I've got to say that even now I do come across situations where people are looking at you and wondering, what are you doing there? You don't look the part, especially for me being, 5 foot tall. They're not, a lot of people aren't used to seeing a woman get in there and dismantle drum kits and lift heavy equipment and drive big vans. But you know what? That's what I do for a living. So now that I'm, fairly well known within a lot of the venues and companies that I work with, they know who I am and what I can do, so they kind of just give me space to do my work. But in those earlier days, it did take a bit to establish myself, so people weren't treating me any differently to the boys there.
Yeah, still unfortunately seems to be that disparity of just women in the industry, but I think women have to work hard. The other thing is that unfortunately women they just do, don't they? They seem to have to work harder to get the same amount of acceptance or respect or credibility, if you will, within the scene.
I have to agree, but it is also something I've made peace with, because it's not something that's going to stop me. Like I am a realist. I can still see that there are faults in the system, but I also can see that there's a lot of allies in the industry who are about, lifting women up and really supporting them in those roles. So I try not to get caught up in that headspace of this wouldn't happen to me if I was a man, because what ends up happening is you ultimately get very frustrated about that situation I overcome this barrier? How can I better demonstrate what I'm capable of?
Yeah. No, I hear you. And I think it's great to see people, women who are on the front line doing it. And one of the reasons I like to have, and I want to be able to have more women on the podcast, is that because while, I'm one who likes to encourage youngsters to get into the industry, and it's all good for me to say, hey, ladies, get involved. We're behind you. We support you. And while that is true, I think nothing speaks louder than if there is a young woman watching or listening to the podcast, actually hearing from a woman doing it for real. And that speaks way louder than whether it's me or any of my colleagues. As supportive as we are, you being here really says, 1,000 times more than what I could.
Yeah. It's definitely doable, even if that road may be a little bit more windy. It's definitely worth that extra effort, and you will get that recognition that you deserve if you just keep honing those skills and work on developing your confidence and skill set.
Yeah, agreed. I also think it's great that you've gone out to do your own thing. I've always encouraged people that want to get involved in the industry by saying that the best way to get your foot in the door is to build your own door to put your own foot through. And it's certainly a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of risks, and it's not an easy path, but I think there's nothing quite like being your own boss and being in control of your own hours and your own destiny.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a double-edged sword. Sometimes you feel you are a slave to your business when you do run a business in its earlier years. But there is just so much satisfaction that comes from building something from the ground up. But I would also advise anyone who does want to get out there for themselves and build a business from scratch, is just don't go in there without doing your research as well, because there's certainly a lot of obstacles that may pull you undone along the way if you go in a bit foolhardy without actually truly understanding the mechanics of what you're doing.
Yep. I think also having some business acumen, and as you said before, your business started by building it piece by piece. And a big mistake I see people make is that it's great that they're enthusiastic and they want to go, with both feet in, but when they overextend themselves financially with loans, and most of the people I know, take out 28% interest credit card debt and stuff like that. And, it's a competitive, music's a competitive world. And particularly when there's two of you, doing pretty much an identical thing. One company's hiring this mic and this company's hiring the same mic. Usually you can fall victim to having them undercut and sometimes work at a loss. If your overheads are out of control, then you really are behind the eight ball.
Yeah, and you don't want to get too sucked into the undercutting game. As much as we pride ourselves on, being affordable for the musician, it's important to still know the worth of your product and your service and what you're offering, and also creating that point of difference. And so for us, we do a lot of East Coast touring, and that means for us, they can, put all of their personal equipment and guitars in our vans, and we can run it up the East Coast, and they've got the same gear every night, and there's a lot less, issues that can crop up if it's always going to be identical equipment every single show. So there is an ease about that, and it does mean that they're also traveling a lot lighter. So we do definitely have our point of difference in the market, and I think that has been what's helped us to establish a sustainable business model as well. But having said that, the industry is so volatile that you do need to protect yourself and make sure you aren't putting in, overextending yourself and putting in too much money without keeping those reserves for the rainy days that will inevitably come.
So tell me about your music career. You still like playing music, or is music something?
I do. Like it did take a little bit of a backseat for a few years while Melbourne Backline Hire started to take hold. So now that there's a lot happening on that front that's now able to run on its own, I've started getting back into performing music. So I'm playing with the band called Subterranean Disposition, which is a bit of a, but it's a Black and Doom Death projects that's now got a fully functional lineup. So we're going to be playing some shows over the next couple of months, which is really exciting because it is something that I love. But I find with my creative projects, I'm all in for a bit, and then sometimes I need to take that step back and wait for that inspiration to strike again. And once that's taken hold, then I'll get back into that project. So yeah, definitely Melbourne Backline, and also the pole dancing has sidetracked me from making music for a bit, but happy to be getting back into that side of things now.
Tell you, the metal scene is a really interesting one, and not that I'm the darling of the scene or know a hell of a lot of people, and I've got a few clients in it, but the one thing that really strikes me is I think for people that don't fully understand or appreciate all the genres of metal, especially when you get into the black metal and speed metal and whatnot, just how technical it is. Even though people might just think it's all noise and it just sounds like machines all out of time, but the musicianship involved in some of it is just phenomenal. In fact, I remember once a guy called Andy Gillan, band called Cemeterio, and the first time I've ever had a client sit on my couch who actually had score, sheet music as we're mastering. He's following the music while he's following the score. Now that's usually the domain of the jazz and the classical cats, but when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I'm impressed. You're legit.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the metal community in Australia as well is just something to behold. There's a hell of a lot of talent in this pool, and there's some Australian musos doing some great things abroad as well, which we should really be proud of. But it only manifests when we can kind of support each other and really lift each other up. So I think we've got a really strong scene here.
Yeah. So let's go into the pole dancing because, as I said, that's how I first got to see and know you, and I was just impressed. What else can I say? I was just super impressed by just the physicality of what was involved in doing that, because to me it just looked like gymnastics, the horizontal bars, but on a vertical bar. And, and I used to see these guys called the bar stars in America, and there's various other groups of guys, gymnasts who, go into parks and do these incredible feats on playground equipment and just whatever they could find. And watching you, I'm thinking, first thing I thought, fuck, that takes incredible core strength and balance and coordination. Wow, that's just fucking full on. So I think pole dancing is one of those things that, because of its past and where people associate pole dancing, what they associate it with, immediately probably would downplay it, turn their nose up at it, maybe not look at it as a legitimate art form or legitimate dancing. So it's interesting that you took that on. So what inspired you to do this? And how is it now that you've become a professional in such a short period of time and as a late starter?
I know. So this month I'm actually turning 35. So I would say I'm probably on the older side of the spectrum for pole dancers. So I've got some major tracks I need to move to catch up to some of those who have some specific pole dancing experience on me. But I have to admit, I was actually really dubious at first as to whether pole dancing was for me. So it took a friend of mine, she's also a musician actually, her name's Plum Green. She was the one that dragged me to a class, and from that very first session, I absolutely fell in love with it because it was so much more than what I anticipated it to be, because just like a lot of people, I assumed it's basically just, what you would see in a strip club. And it is so much more than that. It is its own aerial art form. And it can involve any number of dance styles, whether that be ballet, hip hop, contemporary, you name it. But of course, it's heavily associated with that more exotic style of dance. And although that wasn't something that I resonated with at first, as time's gone on and I've become less inhibited and more into the sport as well, I've gained a really large appreciation for those exotic styles of dance, and I found it a fascinating thing as well. And sometimes I think it's all too easy for women to feel a sense of shame if they allow themselves to be seen as a sexual object or an object of desire. But quite honestly, to me, pole dancing is not an anti-feminist activity. And for those who do say that it is, I would actually encourage them to give the sport a try before passing such judgments, because it does have so many positive effects on someone's life when they take up an activity like pole dancing. And for many people, they do cite their choice to take up pole dancing as a very life-changing event, and because it does have such a positive effect on things like body confidence. And everyone needs a hobby. It's so important. It gives us a sense of purpose and direction. So and it also rolls through to things like career and relationships when we actually feel good about ourselves. So I do owe a lot to pole dancing for those reasons as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great that anything that will encourage women, and as when we spoke recently and you corrected me, my assumption that men weren't pole dancing, but in fact there are guys who are involved in it as well. But I think women who are interested in doing it shouldn't feel intimidated, because I imagine that most women that, what's the school that you train at, or in Melbourne?
I train at Bottoms Up in Brunswick.
Yeah. So I don't imagine that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the people that participate there are super duper fit and pros and who just go all out on it.
No, it's actually a really social activity. So I'm one of the few who's taken it on a little bit more seriously and decided to be a competitive pole dancer, but you can honestly just do it for the sheer fun and pleasure of it. So there are all different body types that get into pole dancing, and one of the biggest excuses I hear out of those who do want to try pole dancing is, I'd love to give it a go, but I don't have the upper body strength, or it looks like so much fun, but I just don't know if I'd have the confidence to do something like that. And the upper body strength comes naturally as you get your start, but I think it's really easy to make excuses as to why we can't take that plunge. So I would implore everyone out there, now that it's a new year, find something that's a little bit outside of your comfort zone and test yourself, experiment, give it a try. You just don't know. You may find something that you truly love. You just got to put aside that fear of judgment or fear of failure and just get in there and give it a go.
And I think when you also couple that up with being in an environment that's very supportive and community-based, it only helps people to keep coming back. And I guess the more you do something, the more comfortable you become. And there's the added benefit of the camaraderie and the friendships. And as you said, it's a social activity as well as a sport.
Yeah. And I've got to be honest, even though I come from a fitness background, like the idea of running on a treadmill just bores me to tears, and I can't do it. I don't enjoy being in a gym. I'm a creative person. So getting into pole dancing means that I can use that creative mind to create something beautiful or learn how to do a trick and really focus on the artistry behind that. So for me, that's how my brain thrives. So although you won't find me in a gym, I maintain my level of fitness doing something that really keeps my focus. So I don't actually realize how hard I'm training half the time, because I'm so focused on getting a move or enjoying the expression of movement.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that, particularly, I mean, you're still a young person in my eyes, but I think, well, you are. You are. I mean, I'm old enough to be your dad, so you are. So, well, you are. But I think that particularly as people get older, it's important that they try to find something for themselves to, I think anything that involves movement and doing something a little bit different and testing you. And it doesn't have to be like trying to climb Everest or anything over the top. But
and you can start small with that goal setting, but I've got to be honest as well that there was a time where I had made peace with the fact that I've lost my opportunity to become a dancer because I should have been at a certain level by this age. And then I eventually had to call myself out on my own bullshit and say, well, no, I can, as an adult, still enter this world and still find enjoyment or some degree of success. So when I was younger, I did do gymnastics and I did dabble a little bit with dancing, but there came a time where I had to choose between the two, and I actually chose to do gymnastics. And that was something that I regretted in my life for a very long time, because I always wondered whether I would have been able to do something very special with dancing, because I felt like I had the heart of a dancer. So I guess the lesson to be learnt from that is that you are never really too old to get out there and try something new. And that, you know, even though I am 35, which might, you know, sound young to you, you know, I am actually now at my fittest point. I'm stronger, I am more flexible than I ever was in my years as a young gymnast. So you would surprise yourself with what your body is still capable of even now. You just got to start realistic and start small. So that's my story.
Yeah, well, it's a good one and an inspiring one. And, you know, I think that people underestimate how resilient their bodies are. I mean, it's an incredible machine and it can bounce back. It really can, you know, whether you're a woman that has had children or you're a bloke that used to train hard and because of work or other commitments just decided, particularly when people are getting into that middle age bracket. And I was one of them. And for me, getting back into the gym really didn't kick off as part of a really regular part of my lifestyle until my late 40s, you know, so I'm 55 now. And I'm no elite athlete or put myself up as any particularly special, but I think that when you focus your mind on doing something that's good for yourself and then taking, as you said, taking the small steps, then over time, you just, you know, your body adapts and you become more resilient. And when you find something that you enjoy, then it's much easier to do. And I'm sure we all have our days where sometimes we couldn't be fucked. But I think the key is consistency over the long haul, and it'll pay dividends. And like you, I'm not saying I'm the best at, you know, in my whole life, but certainly I think for my age, I feel really, really good and feel I'm, you know, I've got a really good level of health and vibrancy and all that kind of stuff. And that just spills over into all other areas of life, you know, in terms of, you know, work and coping and energy level and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I guess now that it is a new year and some of us are already, you know, starting to fall off the bandwagon with our New Year's resolutions, we just need to remind ourselves that establishing that new routine is usually that hardest part. So if you can push through and just keep that level of consistency up, as soon as as soon as those endorphins start to kick, you're going to start to want coming back more and more, and you're going to have more motivation to keep going. So, you know, all I can say is keep persevering with those resolutions, because there is definitely such a massive payoff if you can establish a little bit of a routine, even if it, you know, there are those days where you just don't feel like doing anything at all.
Now, this is true. Well,
Yeah.
Interesting to talk about resolutions, and I talked a bit about it in the last podcast of last year, where, you know, the statistics, and these aren't exact, but they're pretty close, where I think that I said after 24 hours, over 2/3 of people have usually fallen off the wagon. After a week, about 7% of people are still at it. So over 90% have given up. And by the six-month stage, it's less than 1% that usually still continue on. And yeah, it's an interesting thing. The whole New Year's resolution thing. It's like, you know, everything, there's something magical about January 1 or a Monday. And yeah, people get pumped up and motivated and they want to change something. And you know, motivation's great, but it's a short-term thing. And I think what I've learned too, Kitty, when it comes to goals, you know, goals are great and they're important, but one of my previous mentors, Peter Sage, he really shared with me a really great distinction, and which I'll share with you and the viewers and listeners, which is, goals are not necessarily about the achievement of the goal, while it's great to achieve and get all that stuff, but it's about the person that you're becoming in the process. So even if you don't get to exactly where you want to get to, let's say you want to set a goal for, I want to lose 20 kilos in 6 months, and you've only taken care of 10, it's still 10 kilos better off than where you were when you started. And, and you would have learned some new things about nutrition and exercise, and you would have met some interesting people, and you would have changed. There's something about you would have changed to help set you up for the next 6 months and so on.
Definitely. It is about the journey rather than the destination. And last year I did set myself at the start of 2018, I did set myself a goal, but that goal was only small. And for me, it was to enter 2 pole competitions, because I had never competed before. And I was walking into something that was very unknown to me. But I was able to meet those goals and exceed them, which was a bonus. But I guess the moral of the story is to not always set that bar too high, because sometimes when we don't reach those goals, it can be a little bit demotivating. So we've got to set those short to long-term goals, because ultimately it might just take us a little bit longer than what we first anticipated to get there.
Yeah. So take us through what's involved in, so when you did your first comp, how long did you have to prepare for it? And what is involved? How long does it take to put together a routine? How long typically is the routine? Are there certain things that you have to do within the routine itself? Are there certain positions or tricks or certain minimum requirement that they're looking for? And how do they usually score the competitions?
Yeah, so each competition is very, very different as far as scoring goes. They'll look at things like artistry and showmanship, and then also technique as well, and the types of dynamic movements that are used. But there are different types of competitions suited to different types of dances. So for me last year, I ended up competing in the Australian Pole Championships, and that competition is more focused around acrobatic and gymnastics type work, contemporary dance. So most of the performers end up dancing in bare feet versus what's typically seen as pole dancing, which is your dance work in the big heels. Those competitions like Miss Pole Dance and Dance Filthy tend to cater to that more exotic style, where it is still about showmanship, but with all the bling and the high heels as well. So there's still an incorporation of that acrobatic element, but the focus may be more dance orientated or more about the sensual nature of exotic dance, for instance. So that's one of the things I really like about pole dancing, is you're not limited as to how you want to create. So you can choreograph any type of piece you want to. So if you want to dance and do a contemporary piece, something that's really close to your own heart, you can build a concept around that. Or you could just get out there and just do a big performance piece for the fun of it, and just try and get the crowd into riled up. So watching a pole dancing competition is also a highly entertaining thing as well. So if you are curious and you're not quite ready to give pole dancing a try, maybe that's a good way to kind of open your mind up to what it's all about. Go check out a competition and you'll see just how diverse it can be. For me, I only competed in, I think it was about 3 or 4 competitions by the end of 2018. So I managed to at least meet the goals I had set for myself. But also it was a good challenge for me to see what my body was capable of. For me personally, I am grateful for every day that I'm able to do pole dancing or any kind of physical activity, which is what my full-time job encompasses, as being a roadie as well. And I have to admit that a lot of that has to do with a traumatic event that happened in my life, when I had to watch my father go through the rehabilitation process when he had a motorbike accident, a quite severe one that left him paralysed. So it's really easy to forget that life is finite and that our health can also be taken away from us at any time. So for me, I relish that my body's still capable of doing this. And that's part of the reason why my goal setting is now for 2019 quite high, because I honestly don't know how many years of competitive dance I might be able to do. So I'm going to treat each day as my last and just see what I'm capable of. So yes, as you may have touched on as well, this is a fitness activity that people from all walks of life can get involved in. And yes, the benefits are huge, whether you're male or female or something in between. It is a very accepting and loving community. Whether you do work in the sex industry or not, there is no separation. We all are all there to encourage each other and uplift each other and just support the art form itself, because it is such a beautiful expression of creativity.
Now, you mentioned to me when we spoke recently that the pole dancing is going to become a demonstration sport, or there's moves afoot to try and get it as a demonstration for the Olympics?
The rumour is they are looking to trial it. So I've heard that from some pretty reputable sources. But, you know, it's just one way that the pole dancing industry can overcome some of the stigmas. It's not that we want to mask over the fact that it has originated in strip clubs. I don't think that's something we need to feel shame about. But we want to also be able to show audiences that it's much more than that.
Yeah. Tell us about some of the blokes that you've met, and you know, what sort of guys get involved in the sport. Are they gymnasts, or are they guys in middle age who are just looking for something different? Or I can't imagine you have men going there just wanting to go and you know, look at women because they wouldn't last for 2 seconds. I imagine you'd have guys who go there just legitimately want to go and just maybe get out of their comfort zone or do something different. I would find it personally quite intimidating, I must say.
Yeah, look, I got to be honest. It is a bit of a mixed bag, and sometimes what happens is boyfriends get dragged enough competitions, or they're exposed to pole dancing enough that they actually want to try it themselves because they can see their girlfriends investing so much time into this thing that they love. Sometimes it's just a case of an ex-gymnast finding another apparatus to master. So it does attract people from circus and gymnastics backgrounds as well. I mean, there are quite a few men there that do that because they actually do want to dance in heels, but certainly no expectation for anyone to do that when they start pole dancing. So you can do that in any style you want to. I do think that because a lot of gay men are a lot more comfortable with expressing femininity, that they are usually the first ones to jump on board with activities like pole dancing as well. And also there's that comfortable community where they can express that femininity without being ridiculed as well. So there's certainly a mixed bag of males that do dance, but I am seeing an increase as well in the types of men that start joining pole dancing, which is fantastic. So we do want to bridge that gap because it isn't a female-only fitness activity.
Tell me, how do you manage things like injuries and that? Because I know gymnasts, you know, they tear their rotor cuffs, and shoulder injuries usually quite predominant within, you know, the gymnastic world. You know, for people I know that, you know, are active gymnasts. Do you find there are particular injuries that are more prominent within the sport? And how do you manage? And so what do you do to manage yourself to keep yourself in good nick and to try and minimise wear and tear and injury?
Yeah, so prehab's a major thing with pole dancing, because one of the most common would be things like shoulder and rotator cuff injuries, because you are working on a pole, just like gymnastics, where there's a lot of weight going through the shoulders. But also you incorporating the element of a spinning pole as well. So that does increase the amount of force that can go through the body, and also more room for error as well if the muscles aren't ready for the types of activities you're doing. So although I have a lot of muscle memory that's helped me get to this point so early in my pole dancing career, it's really important to maintain all that prehab type of exercise where you are conditioning the shoulders and making sure that the body is executing the movement correctly and that you're recruiting muscles correctly. So Pilates-based training is a big thing that we try to focus on to avoid that, because it's certainly, it can be a fairly dangerous activity, especially when you're talking about what the girls and boys do in competitive pole dancing. And we have to try and mitigate those risks. So just as I was saying before about, you know, health being a finite thing, we also have to have respect for the fact that we are engaging in potentially dangerous activities. And that although it's great to have a little bit of courage, we can't go in there blindly. We need to take the steps and progress through so that we can reduce chance of injury.
Yeah, the maneuvers that where my heart usually, you know, is stuck in my throat is the ones where I often wonder, how do people manage being upside down for extended periods of time because of all the blood rushing to your head, and then all those crazy spinning kind of moves, you know, while you're spinning, and because when you're upside down, everything changes, right? Your orientation just goes out the window because it's not a natural state for us to be in. So how did you go when you started getting to those more extreme moves, particularly when it came to, you know, hanging upside down and the really fast spinning kind of maneuvers?
Yeah, like there's definitely a process to desensitize the body to some of those feelings, but particularly when you first start pole dancing, there is that feeling of almost seasickness when you're working, particularly on the spinning poles. But once you learn how to control the spin a lot better, you tend not to spin quite as fast anyways, or you have a greater control over it. But yeah, whether it's the sensitivity on the skin making contact with the pole, or the calluses that you develop, you know, like it takes time and practice. And even for me now that I'm getting back into comp training, because I've already set myself my first competition date, like it's been a rude awakening as you know, obviously I need to reform calluses and toughen myself up again so that I can you know, be upside down safely, and I still have that same correct engagement through my muscles. Because to me, pole dancing is very akin to what we would class as an extreme sport. So when you're under hot stage lights and you're spinning around upside down on a very sweaty brass or stainless steel pole, there is so much that can go wrong.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so crucial to go to a studio and learn from some of the best. We've got such a great load of instructors in the Australian pole dancing scene that do put safety first and have so many years of experience behind them. So it's not the kind of activity that you would take up and learn on your own. It's really something that needs a lot of guidance so that you can learn right technique.
So you said you set a date for your comp. So when is that date? What is the comp? And leading up to it, like what would be your typical day's training, or how many hours would you need to average to get in good nick for the comp?
Yeah, look, it does depend on the competition and your training ethic. For me, when I'm working towards competition, I'm training pretty much every day, with the exception of maybe 1 to 2 days a week that are rest days, or I might alternate the type of training I'm doing. So I'm not doing 2 power sessions back to back. I might do something more low intensity dance work, and then the following day go back to the intense work again, just to give my body that chance to repair itself. So I am going to be competing in the Pole Championship Series, which is part of the Arnold's Sports Festival.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be on March 17th, I believe. So now I've got a deadline to work to. I find that helps to motivate me, get my ass into gear. But yeah, normally, I mean, and I will be training straight after we finish up, Tony. So I hope this doesn't take too much longer. But yeah, normally I'm training from anywhere, say 1.5 to 3 hours a day to get ready for competition, because that also involves the choreography component as well. So I am going to be creating my own routine.
What about when it comes to nutrition? Is particular nutritional requirements leading into comp because you're burning so many more calories, or is it just your nutrition is just pretty much on point all through the year?
Yeah, it definitely, it gets tighter towards comp time. I find I naturally want to fuel my body with more vegetables and less of the starchy carbs, because I find my body operates better on those things. So I do tighten my belt a little bit in regards to what I eat closer to comp time, just because I know how much my body needs and craves those nutrients. But I am pretty good all year round, having said that. But yeah, it's just like I find I eat so much more when I'm in those really heavy training stages, because yeah, obviously burning a heck of a lot of calories, and the only way those muscles are going to repair themselves as well for the next session is if I feed them properly. So diet really is crucial. But I don't like to refer to it too much as, you know, a diet plan, more so lifestyle plan, because
Sure.
you know, these are elements that we want to incorporate into everyday life, instead of just putting these really stringent rules and restrictions on what we eat every day, which can sometimes sabotage what we're doing as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's all good to be, and I guess it depends on the situation, the sport. Like, you know, bodybuilders who train for comp, it's always so much stricter leading in with, you know, when they're trying to shred and just do stuff that I guess normal people just wouldn't be able to do, because it
I was asked to get into that, you know, when I was a personal trainer. I was asked to get into that bodybuilding side of things, and looking at what they were doing to themselves to strip down and prep for competition. I decided pretty early on that that's just not a path for me. I do like my food too much.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because there's fitness models, there's the bodybuilders, but the women that do it like hardcore, I mean, it's just crazy. Just what it does for your body and your mind, especially when it comes to food and the lack of, because there's so much, you know, I guess starvation in some cases, but still of depleting your body of moisture and nutrition and stuff to get that really shredded look. It's a big price to pay.
Yeah, it is. And for me, I don't think it's a very healthy thing to put the body through. Like, I'm not against the principle of intermittent fasting, but I think what they're doing there does have some negative effects on the body as well. And it does also sometimes create that domino effect when you do start eating properly again, and create issues with eating, and because you're always so conscious of it, it becomes almost like a compulsion, and it can stem into eating disorders and all types of things as well if it's not sensible and it becomes an obsession.
Yeah, I've had a couple of friends in the past who we go out with, and they'd be there, you know, pulling out a alfoil with the chicken breasts and stuff with them, and yeah, I mean, each to their own, but I don't know, I'm just it's just not a path I would particularly choose to go down in life. But hey, you know, if it rocks your world and makes you happy, you know, God bless you. That's all I can say.
How do you?
Yeah. So, Kitty, we're going to let you go and do your training. But hey, it's been really excellent talking with you.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure.
It's
I always love our conversations, Tony.
Yeah, no, they're
table, which is great. So.
Sorry, pardon.
Nothing is off the table in our conversation. So.
Oh, no, nothing's off the table. But again, I think that I just like, you know, part of this podcast for me is to get to connect and chat with people who I have a fascination with, and if there are people that have a great story to tell, who, they've got great work ethic. They contribute. They're positive. The other things I really liked about, your post is that, they were authentic and they were positive. And, some of us probably don't like being referred to as role models, but I think when it comes to, women and body issues and self-confidence, it's just great to see someone out there who is flying the flag by example, but also in the music circle as well. Just great to see, a lady out there who's kicking butt, and particularly, as we mentioned early on, in an area of the music industry that is not usually synonymous with women, and hopefully over time that gap will will lessen. I don't know if it'll ever get to a 50-50 full balance, but I think the more women are doing it, the more examples they set. And then, as I said, young woman who may be watching or listening who has aspirations will get off a lot more inspiration from someone who's actually in there doing the hard yards than me or anyone else.
Yeah, it's just got to be there and be present and take up space, because it will become more normalized as more women are filling these roles. But I definitely encourage anyone out there who really wants to give it a go. Your best way into that industry is to find a mentor or find a company that's willing to provide you with those training opportunities. And if you find yourself continually hitting a brick wall, then maybe it is time to sit back, change the approach, or really work on developing your skill set or an area of speciality. But it's important that you stay present and you are putting yourself out there, because when opportunities do come up, you want to be the first name that people think of.
Yeah, and I think it's all a part of being a pioneer and right at the the cutting edge, if if you will. So I think you've definitely made your mark there, Kitty.
Thanks, Tony.
No worries at all. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you again for joining me, and good luck with the competition at the Arnolds. And drop us a line and let us know how it all goes. So what we'll do, we'll put the details of Melbourne Backline Hire, and your people will be able to catch you on Instagram. Yeah, we'll throw up the your Insta account, and anyone that wants to check you out, they can check you out there and follow your journey, as I have been.
Yes, that'd be wonderful.
Real pleasure, Kitty. Thank you so much. All the best for the future and for the 2019.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
All right, take care of yourself. Well, there you go, Kitty Jane, pole dancing professional and from Melbourne Backline Hire. I really enjoyed that conversation. So thank you very much to Kitty, and thank you very much also to the boys at the Cave Hub in Bond Street, Abbotsford, who I have a lot of time for. So if you're in a band and you want to find a great rehearsal space, you want to do some pre-production, they've got a great PA, they've got a great stage. A lot of Australia's top bands go through there, and go down there and say hello to Rob and James. They'll look after you. All right, I'm out of here. Thanks very much for watching and listening for 2019. We got some really good guests coming up in the weeks to come. I'm really excited about the people that I'll be speaking with and presenting. And I'm out of here. And as I always say, when I close off, please be nice to each other. But more importantly, be nice to yourselves. I love you fuckers. We'll catch you next time round.